I turned 25 a couple days ago, so it's time for me to finally give you guys my top 25 favorite movies of all time. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris and welcome back to another video. So this is a video I've put off for a long time. I'm always asked, what are your favorite movies? Why don't you have a video really detailing that in order? And it's because I've never wanted to commit to a set in stone list, and today's the day. I'm doing it. I turned 25 a couple days ago. Let's do my top 25 favorite movies. I'm feeling it. Before I get into this list though, be sure to hit that like button, comment your favorite movies of all time down below, and of course subscribe and hit that notification bell to help me reach my goal of 150,000 subscribers here on the channel. And if you want extra content from live Q&As to Stranger Things videos to reaction videos, commentary tracks, and more, you can find that over on my Patreon. Any support over there truly does mean the world. And I want to preface this list before I give it to you, give you some ground rules, if you will. This is just my list at this moment in time. Just because I'm putting out a top 25 list doesn't mean this is some binding list that's concrete, set in stone to the end of time. I imagine this list will change, and I hope it does as I watch more movies that are both new releases or movies on my watch list that came out years ago that I haven't seen. Not everything has to be set in stone forever. Our opinions can always change as we as people evolve, and so that's what I imagine will happen with this list. This is just my top 25 favorite movies. As I have recently turned 25, I want to use it as a benchmark to see how this list could change over the years. And frankly, there are probably some of my favorite movies out there that I just forgot to mention on this. I've seen tons of movies, we all have, and so it's hard to narrow it down to just 25. And one final thing, these are my personal favorites. This is not some objective list of the 25 best films ever made because no one wants to see that. This is my personal list. And without further ado, let's do this thing. Coming at number 25, I had to get a comedy on this list, and the one right now that I'm feeling is 21 Jump Street. This is the ultimate comfort movie for me. I watched this countless times in high school. Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill have such great comedic chemistry. But also this movie, while having great laughs, is just an awesome coming-of-age film as well, that if I need a good laugh and to just quote along with something carefreely, I'm going to toss on 21 Jump Street. It's one of those movies that was like formative almost, you know, watching it in high school. So 21 Jump Street always has a special place in my heart. At number 24, I've got Rocky. This is a movie that inspired me at a young age. I remember when I first watched it, I was like, I gotta go lift weights immediately, and I downloaded the Rocky score on my phone. And for years, it's been a staple on that workout playlist whenever I go for a run, walk, or lift weights. It's a motivational film, and I love the underdog story. Rocky won Best Picture for a reason. It's been a timeless tale of overcoming the odds and really embracing the underdog role in life, and I love it for that reason. At number 23 on my list, I've got Scream. I had to get a horror movie on here, and this is the go-to horror movie for me. Yes, it's an iconic slasher, but it also pokes fun at the horror genre as a whole. Like, this is a very self-aware movie that's become almost a required viewing for me at least once a year. Obviously, I'm a fan of the rest of the sequels that would follow, but that original is so fresh and unique. It subverts expectations out the gate as you kill off the Drew Barrymore character in the first 10 minutes, and then the rest of the film is like this whodunit murder mystery with, you know, a teen drama. There's a lot of great comedic lines here, and Matthew Lillard as Stu is a real standout. Scream is a horror classic to me. It's the definitive slasher to me, and it's a movie that I try and watch at least once a year. At number 22 on my list is a movie that I hadn't watched for a couple of years, but I rewatched it twice this year, really quickly climbing the ranks of my all-time favorites. That's gonna be Gladiator. This is a Best Picture winner from 2000, a movie that I am very fond of as of right now. It could be recency bias because of how recently I've rewatched the film, but this movie rules. It is so epic in scale. It racked up the Oscars for a reason, and I was able to see actually Hans Zimmer in concert back in September, and the score from Gladiator played a couple tracks. Chill-inducing stuff, especially in person, but I just adore this film. It's one of the few R-rated movies I was actually able to watch before I was 17 years old because I grew up in a semi-strict household regarding the whole R-rated rating thing. Kind of annoying, but whatever. It's just this epic film, and you buy in to Maximus's lead character. Russell Crowe commands the screen, and the film's super quotable. My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix legions, loyal servant to the true emperor, Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife. I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. It's so damn good. At number 21, I've got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. When this movie first came out, it was my obsession for like over a year or two. I did nothing but quote this movie with my friends and talk about it and revisit it. And to this day, I haven't seen it in a couple years, but it's easily still one of my favorite movies because of the influence it had on me at that time in my life. I watched it like this summer going into my second year of college, And so all my friends had watched it, and like I formed this new friend group. We had just quoted the hell out of this movie. I still quote it when I'm with them to this day. I have like clips from the movie out of context saved on my phone that I'll send them. But it's my favorite Tarantino movie, honestly, and I just think Cliff Booth is such a cool character. This is a movie that reminds me why I love movies. I always love when we take a look at like filmmaking in a movie, and this is one of the coolest movies to do that. Like there are multiple sequences on film sets. You just got that nighttime 60s LA vibe to this movie. The soundtrack bangs. There's not a lot of movies out there as cool as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's a movie that can end his filmography. I know that he's become obsessed with, oh, I gotta do 10 movies, and it's been almost, what, 6 years since he made this movie now, which is crazy to say out loud. Damn, actually, but still, I would be fine with this being his last movie. He doesn't need to do another. Maybe just end on this one. It would be the perfect one to tie bow on the man's filmography. Coming in at number 20 on my list, however, Die Hard. Argue all you want down below, it's a Christmas film. I'll die on that hill. But anyway, Die Hard is my number one action movie of all time, like pure action film. It's got to be Die Hard. Not only is it infinitely quotable and rewatchable, but it created its own subgenre of action films where there's just a bunch of movies that rip off Die Hard. We've got this one like ex-Marine, ex-Navy SEAL, ex-cop, current cop, you know, Secret Service dude, whatever it may be, and they're trapped in one location with a group of villains, terrorists typically. You got, you know, Olympus Has Fallen, White House Down, and many more follow the same exact mold, and that's just because of how well written Die Hard is. I adore this movie, and I make sure to try and watch it around the Christmas season, but I could also watch it year-round. John McClane is just such a cool cop, and the movie's badass. Simply put, it's a badass film with some of the best one-liners in film. I'm gonna say it straight up. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Number 19 might be the most recent movie to come out, and I'm totally okay with that. I think this movie will continue to climb and maybe even reach my top 10 or top 5 one day. So, I mean, if you haven't guessed by now, it's Oppenheimer. I saw the film 3 times, twice in theaters, once on 4K, and I'm due for a rewatch of it again. I was floored when I first saw it in theaters. When I watched it again, I was even more blown away. It obviously racked it up at the Oscars, rightfully so, and Cillian won. You know, Nolan finally got his Oscar, won Best Picture. I was just very happy to see this film receive all these different accolades. Nolan continues to innovate when it comes to filmmaking as an art form. Like, I was just stunned when I watched the featurettes. The cameras used for the black and white IMAX scenes, that was so fascinating to watch the behind the scenes on that, as well as the practical effects used in this film, specifically with the scenes where Oppenheimer is like having these visions of particles, and it was just really cool. But the main reason I love this movie so much, and it continues to grow for me, is probably the score. Obviously, RDJ is great, Cillian's great. The score in this film, and I'm not saying this lightly, it's my favorite movie score of all time. I'm not just making that up. Spotify Wrapped proved that 2 years in a row. I listen to this score ad nauseum, specifically when I'm editing. It is editing fuel. It's a cheat code for life. This is just a masterpiece to me. I don't like to use that word often, but this is. This is a masterwork from Christopher Nolan. He may never top this, and that's okay. This movie absolutely rules. And it's time for a double dose of Nolan, because at number 18 on my list, I've got Inception. This is one of those movies as well that just blew my mind the first time I saw it, and I can't put Oppenheimer above it just yet. I gotta wait a little longer and see, you know, where I'm at in a year or two. But I remember being floored by Inception the first time I saw it, the ending with, you know, the ambiguity of it all. I was like just so driven to want to discuss the ending of this movie with so many people after I first watched it. It's mind-bending, it's huge in scale, and it was one of the first like big blockbuster films that was an original idea that I remember seeing at a younger age. And I remember when it came out in theaters back in 2020, like in the re-release, I was able to go see it. Such a cool experience. Inception, to me, is still Nolan's best movie, but the more I sit, I'm like, Oppenheimer could take its spot pretty soon. At number 17, I've got Toy Story 3, the first Pixar film to make the list. Toy Story 3 is a movie I relate to a bit too much. I've always been hesitant to change. It's something that scares me, but it is a necessary part of life. Toy Story 3 reminds me that's okay. It's a part of life. You're going to have to go through change, and things can be scary, but it's all going to be okay and probably work out for the better in the end. Toy Story 3 serves as a constant reminder of that. It's the strongest Toy Story film to me. It pulls on the heartstrings every time at the end, you know, so long, partner. Oof, oof. A beautiful Pixar movie, and really the end of Toy Story in my eyes. At number 16, I've got Avengers Infinity War. Infinity War and Endgame both could have taken this spot, but I had to pick one, and I went with Infinity War. I still remember being shocked, at a loss of words, if you will, in the theater when I first watched this, as the theater was just audibly gasping as each hero got snapped away or dusted into nothing. It was really a gutsy move by the MCU that I think paid off for them. Infinity War is my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe film, and I doubt it's ever going to be topped. This is an achievement. The way the Russos were able to handle all these different character groupings around not even just planet Earth, but the galaxy pretty much, right? It's impressive stuff. The scope of this film, the scale of these battles, it's really just something that you have to admire. And it is the payoff to years of going to the theater to watch the new MCU movie. It all culminated wonderfully in both Infinity War and Endgame, and this is the darker part 1 that I prefer over Endgame. It's one of the best comic book films ever made. At number 15, I've got Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. This is another instance where I could have put Dead Man's Chest here as well, but I just settled on that OG Pirates movie. This is one of those movies I remember watching as a child all the time. I bought the DVD from Target. I would take the DVD on road trips. I still remember the first time I watched this, with my dad and my brother. I didn't see it in theaters, but it was on DVD, and I just remember being so captivated by every little detail. It's a swashbuckling adventure with really well-written characters, and I didn't realize at the time when I first watched it, but the score is out of this world. Like, as I got older and I started to look deeper into movies, I was like, oh wow, the use of music in this film, outstanding. It's just a classic adventure to me, and a movie that I could toss on anytime and be enthralled. That trilogy's my jam. I don't acknowledge the 4th and 5th Pirates movies, but The Curse of the Black Pearl, I have heard of you. At number 14, I've got Ratatouille. A movie that reminds you to chase your dreams, and I gotta say it, anyone can cook, baby. This movie will always inspire me to the end of time. Anytime I toss on Ratatouille, I'm reminded, hey, do what you love, chase your dreams. You only got one life, and anyone can cook. Ratatouille serves as a reminder to just go for it. Full send, and don't look back. Have no regrets in life. It's a beautiful little film from Pixar that might be their best. At number 13, I've got Jaws. Steven Spielberg had to make this list, and spoiler alert, we're not done talking about Spielberg. Jaws is the definitive shark film. It's iconic in every sense of the word in terms of a horror film, the score from John Williams, the adventurous elements. This movie works because of the characters. Matt Hooper, Chief Brody, and Quint, and these 3 characters who are very different, go out on this boat and they go to try and kill this shark, and it's an adventure at its core. It's an inspiring movie, but it's also horrifying, especially if you're scared of sharks. This is a movie that kept people out of the water for like their entire life. People watched Jaws and were afraid to go into the ocean ever again. It's a very effective movie, and I love how it utilizes the fear of the unknown. We don't see that shark for a lot of this film, especially early on, and so what you're imagining happening to these people underwater is more horrifying than what we actually end up seeing. It's a masterfully directed film, and it's become an essential 4th of July viewing for me. It is the 4th of July movie. At number 12, which could be a shock to some of you, I've kind of realized this over the past few months, I'd say, I've got Spider-Man from 2002. I think I'm at a point where I can say this might be my favorite comic book movie of all time, even over Infinity War. It oozes that comic book feel, and Sam Raimi's in his bag when he directs it, but Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is really what steals the show here. Not only is he quotable, but he's so freaking menacing and just effortlessly steals every single scene he's in. I also believe this is a perfect origin story for Spider-Man, getting his powers and learning how to deal with being Peter and Spider-Man. I'm nostalgic for the Raimi trilogy, I will admit, but I've seen Spider-Man more than any of the other Spider-Man movies recently. I looked on Letterboxd, and this is the one I've logged the most, aside from No Way Home, obviously, which is kind of inflated from all the time I saw it in theaters, but still, Spider-Man, absolute banger. My favorite of the Raimi trilogy, and probably a top favorite comic book film of mine, if not the favorite as of filming this video. At number 11, I'm going National Treasure. Childhood favorite. Watched it all the time growing up. Quote it to this day, and I even had the DVD I would take on car trips where I got to decode certain messages and find the treasure myself. This is an unconventional pick. I know a lot of people don't have the same fondness for this film as me, and that's okay. This is just my personal list. I really just had a fondness for the Disney live-action adventure films, from the Pirates movies to National Treasure. I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence. We're getting into the top 10 now, and I need some water. Water break. Coming in at number 10, I've got Good Will Hunting, a movie that also reminds me, hey, go after it. You only live one life, and have no regrets when you do it. I adore this film. Robin Williams delivers one of my favorite performances ever won an Oscar, rightfully so, and of course Ben Affleck and Damon won for their screenplay. Oftentimes people will say it's all about how you end your movie, because that leaves the lasting impact, right? That's the last thing you see and walk away with. Good Will Hunting's final moments and the final line hit. At number 9 on my list, I've got Moneyball. This has, funnily enough, become my go-to plane movie that I throw on to pass the time on a long flight. But this movie takes a look at the analytical side of baseball, and Brad Pitt delivers one of his best performances. So does Jonah Hill. Not only is Michael Dyna's score so underrated, I think it may be the most underappreciated score of the last decade and a half, but the film's so well directed, and I can't believe it makes me care about baseball. That's a sport I grew up loving. I had baseball cards, I played t-ball. I've grown so far out of any love I had for that sport, but I am so intrigued every time I toss on Moneyball. It's like I'm right there living through the moment, and the streak sequence when they have the 20-game winning streak. Oh, the way that it culminates with Hatterberg's homer, you gotta love it. It's one of those movies that you toss it on and I'm around, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna have to watch Moneyball, all right? But coming in at number 8, I've got Whiplash. This used to be like in the top 5, and it's still right there in that conversation. I had to sit down and rank these movies, and Whiplash fell at number 8. Fletcher, played by J.K. Simmons. Iconic. Quotable movie. I mean, it's also just so darkly comedic. The ending is haunting. It's also uplifting, strangely, depending on, what angle you approach it with. And I think that's the beauty of Whiplash, is you can interpret this film in different ways. There's a clear message, but you could also say, hey, I'm actually going to view it this way. And I think those final 15 minutes are so riveting. It's one of the best finales I've ever seen to a movie. At number 7, I've got another Christmas movie, the Christmas movie, Home Alone. Growing up, I watched this movie year-round. It didn't matter if it was Christmas or not. It's just so special. It's such a warm movie that brings that Christmas spirit and warms my heart by the end of the film. But also just seeing this kid living the childhood dream of being home alone and then setting up his house with all these, traps for these burglars who come. It's a Christmas classic, but it's also a childhood classic and a movie that has some adventure to it, and I gotta shout out that John Williams score. One of his more slept on scores, I'd say. Things get really hard from here on out. Number 6 for me is going to be Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, the movie that forever I said was my favorite movie. It's still right in that conversation. I just have a few others that have edged it out at this moment in time. A New Hope is the hero's journey done perfectly. It launched this whole Star Wars world that we all have come to love over the years. I mean, there's just something so classic about that original Star Wars film. Every hero is so well written. Vader's become maybe the most iconic villain ever. You see his silhouette, you hear him breathing, you're like, oh yeah, that's Darth Vader. There's this magic that I associate with not only this film, but the entire original trilogy. It's a huge part of my heart, and it formed who I am as a person, frankly. Like that original trilogy, I grew up with the toys, and I would pause the movies and I would reenact scenes with the toys as the scene played out on my TV. I really just have such a fondness for the original trilogy, this film in particular. And the one scene that I always have to mention when I bring it up is the binary sunset. The two paths Luke could take, he sees them as this beautiful piece of music plays by John Williams. Oh, at number 5, I've got The Lion King. Another one that I watched probably too much as a kid. I had the DVD and I just would watch it like every day for a bit there. It was pretty wild, I'm not gonna lie. When they re-released it in like 2005, I watched it. I played all the special features where you go on like this safari with Timon and Pumbaa. I was real in on The Lion King, and to this day, it's still my favorite Disney animated film. Lin-Manuel Miranda recently said it's a no-skip album, and I'm right there with him. That soundtrack's a banger. The score itself by Hans Zimmer's out of this world, and the story is just so powerful. But there's one line from this movie that really stands out to me. It's when Rafiki hits Simba over the head, and he's like, you see, the past can hurt, but the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it. So this is a movie that reminds you, hey, you might have done some things you're not proud of. You might have done some things, made some mistakes in the past, but you can't just run from your fears. You got to face them. You got to learn from the past, move on, and become a better person because of it. And The Lion King's a constant reminder of that. What a beautiful, beautiful movie from Disney. And to me, this is always going to be king of their animated films. At number 4, I've got Remember the Titans, the sports movie to me. Watched the hell out of this movie growing up. I also quote it constantly with my friends or just in my day-to-day life. Left side, strong side. And it's another one of those soundtracks I go to all the time. It's a beautiful story about T.C. Williams High School in Virginia during the segregation days. They integrate where black and white players can play on the same football team. They go to school together. And it's a story of just coming together to achieve a common goal and become brothers on and off the football field, especially during such a heated time in the U.S. It's a really powerful watch, and I never fail to tear up. It's a wonderfully made film and one that I cannot recommend enough. It is the best sports movie I've ever seen. At number 3, I've got The Social Network, which I'd say is probably my most rewatched movie of this current decade so far. I go to this movie multiple times a year. Andrew Garfield was robbed of an Oscar nom. Jesse Eisenberg maybe should have won an Oscar here. The score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross is so techno and upbeat, but also really emotional at times too. And I'm just real intrigued by this story. I've read all about this movie and the fact that it was like a 180-page long script, which would equate to about a 3-hour movie. But Aaron Sorkin and David Fincher like got together and timed, how quickly the lines had to be read in order to make this a 2-hour movie. And they would be on set, and if the actors weren't on pace, they had to literally yell cut and restart. This movie was like made down to a T, scientific. It was precise. It was perfect. Love every second of it, and it is one of the best movies of the century so far. My runner-up as it stands right now is going to be Back to the Future, which is a movie that I probably quote just about as much as any other movie out there. Every day I feel like I just randomly mention Back to the Future or just think of it. It's the iconic 80s movie, and it's many people's favorite film of all time for a reason. Not only is it just cool as hell, you got a DeLorean that travels back in time. The characters are really what sell this movie with Doc and Marty, their relationship. And it's just a movie that's so relatable because we all have parents or family, and you go back in time and see a younger version of them. It's like, what the hell is going on here? It's also just brilliantly written. You pair up the dude who's always late in Marty McFly with the scientist whose inventions are faulty, and they have to find a way to get back to the future. It really is just pure genius and the definitive 80s movie. But my number one movie of all time, my favorite as a 25-year-old as of filming this video, is Raiders of the Lost Ark. This movie just inspired me from such a young age. I would go, after I first watched it, which I still remember to this day, I went out in the backyard and I acted like I was Indiana Jones trying to find some ancient artifact. I ended up getting a hat. I had like a fake toy revolver and a whip, and I would create these intricate scenarios in my backyard where I was, hunting down treasure. I would reenact scenes from this movie. Franchise means a ton to me. This character is my favorite character of all time, and it all comes from Raiders of the Lost Ark. If adventure has a name, it must be Indiana Jones. This movie means the world to me. I think I saw it 3 times or 4 times alone last year. I probably need to watch it before this year's end, honestly, but I think it's Spielberg's best work, and no other adventure film out there does it like Indiana Jones. It's action-packed. The score from John Williams is iconic, not only the main theme, but Marion's theme. I could sit here and gush about this movie for days, and I would if you would let me. Raiders of the Lost Ark is king to me, but it's a really close race. Like, all of my top 5 to 7 movies could, or probably at one point in time have been, in that number 1 slot, but as of right now, I go Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite movie of all time. So that does it for my top 25 favorite movies of all time in honor of turning 25. Let me know yours in the comments down below. Subscribe to that notification bell and stay tuned for more content coming very soon. But until next time, I'll see you guys later.